Welcome to the Life of Hair. My name's James Atkinson. Thank you for choosing to join us on this week's episode. Now, this week's episode is a follow-on from last week's episode, as promised in last week's episode. Now, the first part of this was called, and I've got it here in front of me because it's a long name, Scalp, Bleach to Highlights and Root Stretch Hair Color Part 1. I know that's not the most succinct name, that doesn't roll off the tongue beautifully, but that's how the YouTube algorithm works best. Now, if you want to see that episode before you watch this one, then be my guest, head over to my channel and make sure that you find the Scalp, Bleach to Highlights and Root Stretch Hair Color Part 1. Now, this is a journey. This is so that you understand the journey from a scalp bleach application that has grown out very, very long bleach regrowth into something softer, more lived in, a more lived in blonde type of highlight effect. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. How do you follow this service up compared to the first service? It's a really, really cracking, easy highlighting technique once you've taken them from that hard demarcation that a scalp bleach creates. It's a really, really easy follow-up surface. It's really, really fun to do. It's a bit more of a visual highlighting technique. You'll see. I won't keep you much longer. Thank you for choosing to join in. As I mentioned earlier, I appreciate each and every one of you who come back week after week, and everyone that is new to the channel. And if you're new, I bring out content every single Sunday and sometimes in the week as well, but I definitely will be here on a Wednesday night to do a live session where it's coloring, cutting and Q&As galore. So do check that out. Bit of a stammer there. So thank you again for everybody who is a Patreon of the Life of Hair. It's hugely appreciated. And if you want to take your Life of Hair education a little bit deeper and you want to get a deeper insight into some of the techniques I use, the whys and the wheres, then do check it out in the description down below. And there's also links to nearly all of the products used in the creation of the Life of Hair videos, plus a 10% discount on some scissors from Yowie Scissors. So if you're in the market for some new scissors, that's the place to go. Until next time, guys, look after yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon. So here we have the starting point of this 10-week regrowth from the previous color. So it was 10 weeks from the first time I broke up that hard demarcation. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, in my eyes, it could have gone another, I don't know, 10 weeks maybe. It's beautifully blended. It's really, really soft. The transition between the two colors is nearly seamless, and it's really all my job I've got to do now is bring that root color back up towards the scalp and put in a very, very simple visual highlighting technique. Now, I've made two rectangular shaped sections in the top of the head just so that I can use herringbone shaped sections through those particular partings, but for the rest of it I'm going to use horizontal sections and very fine weaves. Now let's talk about the style of weave I'm using here. One of the really, really important key factors to this particular technique is getting those foils super fine. The hair within the foil wants to be baby fine, hence the name baby light. But the really, really good way of remembering or knowing that you're doing a baby light is that if you got a newspaper or a magazine article and slid it underneath that section, would you be able to clearly read the words on the paper? And if the answer was no, then that section is too thick, too chunky. You need to go back, reweave that same section, because that's perfectly fine to do. You can double weave the sections if that helps you, or start that section again. And for me, it's most definitely one of those things where when I'm teaching classes, and I used to teach a highlighting class for many, many years, lots and lots of people don't necessarily get their baby lights fine enough. And they're too close to like a regular stitch. You know, they're like a micro stitch. They're small, but they're not small enough. Remember, we're just creating an effect in the hair. We're not changing the hair's color. And this is where true highlights come into play, rather than us changing the client's total color, because I think we've got into that habit of putting in foils with 2 or 3 mil gaps in between, a regular weave in those foils, and basically changing the entire color of that person's head from brown to, you know, platinum blonde or whatever, level 10. So in this particular instance, it's really important that we remember that our weaves are very, very micro fine. And specifically, we'll talk a little bit about the spacings of these sections as we travel through the side section. So you'll see in there, I've worked very freely horizontally straight up the head. And now I'm going to talk about what sort of a gap we are looking for in between each of our sections. Now you'll note from last week's session, and bearing in mind there's 10 weeks in between of these sessions in real life, the gaps in between were slightly smaller because I was taking somebody from a scalp bleach to something a lot softer in their eyes. But when we do this particular application, we can leave at least 10 millimeters in between each of the sections. Now that is big gaps, big spaces, as thick as my finger at least. Now, when we're doing these techniques and we're leaving these big gaps, if our weaves are too chunky, we start to leave defined stripes within the hair. Now, this is where these techniques can go really, really wrong. And when I've been teaching classes about baby lighting, as I mentioned previously, sometimes people revert to that regular stitch and they think that baby light techniques that are leaving 10 millimeter spaces in between each of the foils are chunky or stripy or whatever. Remember, guys, it is all about that very, very diffused weave. I said it right at the start because I really wanted to drive it home that that was a very, very integral part to doing this technique. So as you can see here, so doing exactly the same things we were on the back sections, working horizontally up the head. Now lots of people ask me why I work horizontally and doesn't it leave the hair stripy and da 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 da. No, providing we're making sure that we're using micro fine weaves. You will not be able to see these in the hair. They will be beautifully interspersed within the sections, and therefore it doesn't matter whether we really work horizontally, diagonally or vertically, specifically because of the fine nature of the weaves. So really straightforward, really easy to do. We are just following the contour of the head, working up towards those 2 rectangular sections that I created through the center of the parietal ridge and then split the head down the middle to create 2 rectangle sections that we're just going to simply work up towards. So I've completed the opposite right hand side to avoid boring you with a few more foils, because I'm sure you don't want to see any more horizontal foils. And we're moving on to what is not a money piece as such, but a little bit more tightly packed together around the front hairline. A very, very soft money piece. Probably the sort of highlighting spaces that lots of people would regularly leave in between each of their sections when they've got used to putting in what I would describe as too many highlights and changing the color and not really highlighting the hair. My best analogy for that is if I gave you a book and a highlighting pen and asked you to highlight the word "and," you wouldn't unmercilessly go across each and every line of the page just in case there was an "and" on it, or you wouldn't just put the pen across the whole line that said "and" in it. You would find the "ands" and pick them out, and I would be able to find the word "and" easily. This is no different when we're creating highlights, and that's a really good way of remembering that highlights are what they say they are, highlights, picking out pieces of hair and creating textural changes rather than color changes. There is nothing wrong with color changes, they're just not necessarily highlights. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle with undercharging and not being able to do the services within the time frame expected of them. So think about that, guys. If that is you, then maybe it's time to rethink how you do things and how you charge for things and how you space your timings. But remember, this first 3 foils are with probably 2 mils between each foil, and then subsequently the gaps are going to get slightly wider towards the back. So we're going to go from 2 mils to 3 mils, from 3 mils to 5 mils, from 5 mils to 7 mils, and that will be taking us all the way to the crown area at the back. But when we are doing these weaves, we are just got to concentrate. We really do need to concentrate on how fine we make each of these weaves, because if we start to slip into our old habits of creating chunkier weaves, well, we're going to be in a lot of trouble, because this technique is going to look very, very stripy indeed. The more of a gap you leave in between each of your foils, the more you need to concentrate on leaving microfine weaves to color. So your weaves have to be baby fine, and I just emphasize this so much because I've seen it go wrong. I've seen students in my class not necessarily do it and be disappointed with the results. Now, there's nothing wrong with the technique, it's just how the technique has been perceived or applied. So I'm really driving home the nature of these baby fine weaves is mega important. But you'll see as we go through this technique, and you'll see from the finished result right at the end, that if you're diligent and you make sure that you do exactly what you're supposed to with those weaves, you will have happy days. Now you can see here the spacings of the sections are getting slightly wider, and that is just to create that added softness as we transition into the back and really reduce the amount of time that it will need for this client to have her hair refreshed. She would like to refresh her hair every 10 weeks or so, and that's fine by me. So that is exactly what we're going to achieve with this today. Now, this technique, application time approximately 45 minutes or so, so quite a quick, nice and easy application time. My client's got lovely fair hair, so it processes very quickly, and this whole thing, including a little trim and a nice little styling at the end, was 3 hours start to finish. In fact, it was probably just under 3 hours total. So I just want to show you what we did on the opposite side, just so you can see, taking that very fine slice of hair off the front hairline, and then applied our foil, and our first 3 foils are about 2mm spacing. Remember to always do exactly what you did on the first side on the second side. For continuity reasons, our eyes are drawn to things that do not match one another. We are designed as human beings to see a pattern is not been replicated. So the more consistent and even we can create our foiling patterns, the more natural our brains will perceive it. And I know I've had people say to me in the past, well, you know, that doesn't necessarily make sense. What about randomness? Well, randomness only works in certain scenarios. And I think for me, when we start looking into how the brain works and what the brain will see, it's a bit like if you had a bleed. It's glaringly obvious. It jumps out at you so much because your brain is seeing pattern, changing the pattern, and it's kind of jarring the brain to be alerted to the bleed. It's just how our minds work. Not everybody's as analytical as the other one, but most of us have that kind of naturally. So something to think about, especially as our clients perceive their hair colors. It's not always down to us, obviously, whether we like it or not. That doesn't matter. They've got to take it home at the end of the day. So it's always something to think about. So anyway, 3 foils with 2mm spacings in between each, and then we subsequently space out those foils as we work back towards the crown area, getting slightly wider up to about 6 or 7mm in spacings as we get to the back. Now we allow this to process. In my humble opinion, I think it's really important that we take the sections out as we did them, as to avoid over processing. I took the back section out first. I took the left hand side, then the right hand side, and then the top 2 sections then came out after that. We toned it with 010N and 010P, which is pearl, which is a blue violet shade, and the N is a natural. And I wanted to show you, before I styled the hair, what the hair looked like, because when you style it, you know, you don't put your hands through it and move it around. But this is the finished result. This is what it looks like at the root area. It looks very similar to the beginning, obviously, because I didn't want to make it look drastically different. Because if I made it look drastically different, there would have been more than 10 weeks worth of maintenance to be had. So think about it. You're not there to then add more colour in and take them back to being super blonde. You're only trying to emphasize what you did previously, or repeat what you did previously. In the previous video, I put a root stretch in between each of the foils as well to break up the demarcation. That is no longer necessary, and we can just carry on with our foils. There is that kind of not a money piece thing going on around the front. It's slightly blonder, foils are slightly closer together, but it's still much softer than doing a money piece per se. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this episode. I hope you've enjoyed the journey of watching 2 applications to fix one problem back to back. Everything's much softer and it's much more lived in. And it's, for me, this is the sort of work I would prefer to produce day in, day out, because it's much easier than doing scalp bleaches and very technical services. I don't mind doing very technical services, but you know, try and make some of your work easier on you, your body, your back, by creating those longer times in between services, creating services that are easier to apply. You know me by now. If anybody watches my channel regularly, I try and make these things as easy as possible, not just for you, but for me too. You know, I'm here to protect my back, my legs, my whatever, for as long as humanly possible, because I love standing behind the chair and I want to do it for a long time, and I want to do it pain free. So until next time, guys, look after yourself, and I'll see you again very soon.